Chapter 2, CTRL-Z. I remember when I transitioned from using a typewriter to typing on my computer for the first time. I couldn't believe it. I went from the frustration of waiting for that liquid whiteout to dry before retyping over my mistakes to the luxury of saving and editing right there on the same document. Life-changing. But nothing brought more excitement to my essay writing than the day I was told about CTRL-Z. I was like, let me get this straight. You mean all I have to do is keep pressing CTRL-Z to undo my mistakes and start over? For those of you who are laughing at me because I'm dating myself, or if you don't know what a typewriter is, it's okay. Undoubtedly, all of us can relate to the world of technology and how it has indeed been life-changing. But why am I talking to you about CTRL-Z? Well, I wonder how many of us have wished we could do that with a text message, an email we've sent, or with words spoken. What about that season of your life or relationship for which you wish you could have a do-over? James R. Sherman says, though no one can go back and make a brand new start, anyone can start from now and make a brand new ending. But it's not instant. There really are no CTRL-Z keys to push as we are living our lives. But change is possible. The Lord has committed himself to us, to walking with us through the darkest parts of our story. He's our Redeemer, and he can make all things beautiful in spite of the dark and ugly of our lives. For Vaughn and I, this truth is our lived reality. Yes, we experienced life-altering transverse myelitis, which attacked my body just after we were engaged. But part of the story includes the miscarriage during the time we were rebuilding our lives. That loss compounded because of the doctor's conclusion that we were pregnant with twins. That definitely became a major life-shaping element in our CTRL-Z story. How could two little ones we never had a chance to meet be used so extensively in our do-over? But that's exactly what our gracious Heavenly Father did. Let me take you back to the night we lost those two little ones. And as I walk you through the events that followed, you'll be able to see the hand of God. You'll see how he takes those dark and ugly parts of our lives that threaten to keep us stuck, and he turns them into something beautiful that can heal us. On the night that I miscarried, Vaughn was due to leave on a business trip early the next morning. I remember feeling numb with shock and grief, but he seemed oblivious to what had just happened. He continued with his plans and left a few hours later. Even though I hadn't asked him to stay, I felt abandoned when he headed out the door to the airport. I could not begin to embrace the depth of my loss. That next morning when I woke up alone, I was just a lifeless body. I was numb to any real emotion. I called my sister and I told her I'd lost the baby. Her immediate response was, "I'm coming." The next day, my sister was by my side and insisted that I take time off work. I am thankful that she was there for me, facilitating the arrangements at a time when I didn't know what I needed or wanted. That same week, my mother-in-law called offering to take me to my D&C appointment. I might not remember much about the details of that appointment, but one thing that screams from the memory of that day was how emotional I got when I realized I could not have done this alone. And while my mother-in-law insisted she didn't feel as if she did much, I couldn't thank her enough. I told her many times, "Mom King, just you being there was exactly what I needed in a time when I felt abandoned." About a year or so after the miscarriage, I showed my sister a few things I had purchased while I was pregnant. She said,
"Leanne, this is the first time I've ever heard you talk about pregnancy or the details around your miscarriage. I didn't even know that the doctor had told you it looked like you had twins." It's really nice to finally hear you talk about it.
When it was time to write about this traumatic event in my first book, Going Farther, I actually had to ask my sister to help me recall an accurate picture. My entire recollection of this time was foggy at best. When we started discussing more details of the miscarriage, she helped me uncover things I didn't even remember. I was shocked when she told me I had seemed to be minimizing the entire loss. As she listened to me, she realized that I had never appropriately grieved that painful loss. I later learned that this response is quite typical of denial. I would also come to understand that denial can be a pattern of response. Stay tuned for our very unexpected discovery of some of the beginnings of my well-established pattern of denial. And spoiler alert, it will be related to how we omit the huge step of grieving the losses that was brought about by the virus that attacked my body, leaving me in this wheelchair. You may remember the analogy of that seal caught in the net. This was another example of me wanting to be free, but not knowing how. In the hours after the miscarriage, denial was so apparent, but not to me. I had really needed my sister to help me figure out what to do next, but I didn't even know how to ask. She said,
Leanne, when I suggested that you take a little time off work, your initial response was that you didn't think it was necessary. That's when I knew that you had everything locked up inside, and I knew I had to help.
That's the thing with denial. You don't know you're doing it. But acknowledging denial and getting in touch with your own painful realities that we stuff away might just be that beautifully ugly part of the process that helps us get to the next stage of healing. About 3 years after our miscarriage, Vaughn and I received the tragic news of a dear friend and her husband who had just had a miscarriage. I remember Vaughn saying that he was sad, and he continued to talk about it with such compassion. As I sat there, I was in a little disbelief. I mean, I know it's sad, but I had this moment where I just stopped and looked at him, and without sounding accusatory, I said, "Yes, it is." And you know, Vaughn, that's exactly what I went through. My husband is not an emotional guy who cries easily, but he spontaneously reached over and held me with tears in his eyes and said, "I'm so sorry I left you that morning." That totally unexpected response was followed by, "Tell me about that day. I want to know." As I shared, I couldn't believe what happened next. When I got to the part where the doctors had said it was twins, he once again leaned over and embraced me and said, "I would have wanted twins. I am so sorry." Let's just say that there was more healing available to us both that day that made our love grow even stronger. Let's fast forward to January 19th, 2018, 15 years after the miscarriage. I was telling Vaughn about an event that I just spoke at and how I met this young girl named JL. I told him that she reminded me of my childhood faith. Through meeting her, God showed me that I do have that childlike faith again. As I was sharing with Vaughn, he asked, "What did you say her name was?" Well, you will not believe what he said next. He told me that back when we were expecting, he daydreamed a little about the names we would use if we had a boy or a girl. He continued to say that he had JL as one of the girls' names on his short list. I said, kind of laughing and a little disbelief, "What? And when were you going to share this with me?" But in all honesty, as time went on, I guess it just hadn't really mattered. But the story doesn't stop there. January 26, 2018, 1 week after this conversation, I was at the One conference in Edmonton. I was listening to a presentation from Compassion Canada. While I definitely felt a tug in my heart, I didn't know if it was because I was to sponsor a child or that I just simply was so moved and touched by the story. Well, as I attempted to continue my day and go to my next lecture, I couldn't shake this feeling that I needed to go and see if the Compassion Canada booth had a girl named, you guessed it, JL. I actually thought it was a way to get off the hook. I mean, that's not a very common name. So I kind of said, okay, God, if there's a JL, I'll sponsor her. I went to the booth and told them the same story I've just told you about Vaughn, etc. The lady at the Compassion Canada booth, now in tears, gushed, "That's a beautiful story." But as she glanced down at the boxes of children's donor cards, she continued, "Nothing here is in alphabetical order, so to find a specific name would be almost impossible. Also, in all of my years of working with Compassion Canada, I have never seen the name, JL. Many a Carlos, but never a JL. By this time, the manager was also enthralled with my story and added, 'Let me take your name and number, and tonight I'll look in the database and see if I can find a match.' As he was writing down my contact information, another staff shouts, 'I found it!' He responded and said, 'You found what?' She said, 'I found a JL.' Now we were all in tears and can't believe our eyes and ears. She continued by saying this, 'But it's a girl, is that okay?' I said, 'Yep, it's supposed to be.' Then she finished with a remark that left our jaws on the floor. She said, in a sad voice, 'But she's 15. She had assumed I wanted a toddler because typically everyone looks for the young, cute kids. That pushed me into a full-on ugly cry. Immediately, I knew I had to sponsor JL. Do the math. She would have been born just about the time our twins were due. I couldn't wait any longer. Without hesitation, I was signing on the dotted line and being interviewed by Compassion Canada. They felt this was a story that needed to be shared. Let's back up one moment. The instant I heard they found JL and knew I had to sponsor her, my response was, I can't have this baby without Vaughn being on board. And we all laughed. By now, I'm sure you all agree that when God heals, or he does a Control-Z, he does it with amazing detail. Forgiveness set me free. My life experiences have given me a crash course in understanding the process of creating that do-over, but also on forgiveness, one that I certainly did not pass with flying colors. And now that you know more of our story, let me share that faulty view I held so long about forgiveness. I feel that exposing and shedding the faulty thinking can be another key element in that process which helps us move forward. I confess that forgiveness for me was like a 4-letter word, and at times reminded me of what I felt unworthy of. Other times, I used it inappropriately and threw the word around without much thought. Let's just say my words didn't match my heart. But the truth is, the topic of forgiveness made me very uncomfortable. As an adult, I loved the Lord, but was quite content to keep a faulty mindset that God will forgive me, so I don't really need to give up X, Y, or Z, nor do I really need to forgive that person. My tainted view was, no one's perfect, so I can do whatever I want, and even hold on to a little unforgiveness, and God will still love me, right? And while this is true, God doesn't withhold his love from us. I will tell you that that is no way to live. I am so thankful that I came to the point that I no longer wanted to live a life where I was just getting by. I wanted more. I hated living in fear and being tossed around and taken down by every challenge that came. I no longer wanted to be controlled by emotions or by the people in my circumstances. I guess hanging on to X, Y, and Z was more toxic to my relationship with God and to my character than I realized. I wanted the courage not only to survive, I wanted the courage to thrive. I admit I didn't really feel any big burst of love or repentance when Vaughn chose to forgive me. It was not until I was ready to take ownership for where I went wrong and stop blaming others and God for my pain, that I was ready to take that first step forward, accepting forgiveness. There's that flashing yellow warning sign again. Faith really is scary. Trusting in something that you can't see feels much like walking in the dark. But how could I leave behind that life of bondage and sinful attraction behind? When I attempted to, all I heard in my mind was, "You'll never amount to anything. And who do you think you are? You'll never be able to change. You're not worthy of God's love and forgiveness. Vaughn deserves better than you." These thoughts plagued my mind and threatened to hold me back. Actually, in all human thinking, I didn't deserve forgiveness. None of us do. How many times did I just long to place my fingers on that CTRL-Z key and make everything better? Simply not possible. Rather, I was slowly learning to trust in the Lord with all of my heart and lean not on my own understanding. I was acknowledging Him, and He was directing my paths. Proverbs 3:5-6. When I read these words from Romans 5:20, "But where sin increased, grace increased all the more," I think about all the grace that Vaughn has shown me. I am in full agreement that the bigger our mess, the more God's love and grace is evident. Walking by faith gets easier when you trust the one leading you. If I was still hanging on to the pain I felt when I lost my health, or when Vaughn left for his business trip, just hours after we lost our babies, I would have blocked us both from more healing and freedom. Some people ask me if Vaughn and I really and truly have forgiven each other. Without hesitation, I can tell you that Vaughn and I say that our love is stronger than the day we said I do. We actually consider each other our best friends. And in case there's any doubt, you're about to get a glimpse into the window of his heart as he shares the foreword he wrote for my first book. You'll see that we are living far past just the act of forgiveness and are living in the more that God had intended for us.
My life was changed when I met Vienne. I knew we were a perfect match, and it wasn't only because our names were so similar. We both shared many common interests and beliefs, one of which was the deep friendship and fellowship of a personal God. I don't think my life is all that extraordinary. Bad things happen to everyone. Everyone has a story. Before I met Vienne, a coworker took me aside and told me there was no shame in breaking out of my wedding plans. My situation had changed and I should reevaluate my commitment to this girl. Although their concern was with good intentions, I couldn't accept that their perspective of my life would be over if I married this girl in a wheelchair. People say that I have such a great testimony because I was willing to make a difficult decision and stick by a person who just had her world pulled out from under her. Even though I didn't know why something like this would have happened to Vienne or me, I believe God is in control of everything. And Vienne was still the same person I fell in love with. When Vienne first came to me and told me she was writing her story, I asked her why. What do we have to share? We're not perfect or have everything figured out. We've struggled financially, spiritually, and emotionally. Do we really need to tell the world about our life, our mistakes, and our challenges? Personally, I'm not really interested in being the center of attention, but I accept that God gave her a desire to write her story. And over the years, I've never seen someone more dedicated or determined to complete this enormous task. When I finally read her first draft, it dug up a lot of forgotten emotions and memories. With tears in my eyes, I had to thank Vienne for staying with me as well during these rough times. We both had to take responsibility for actions and opportunities missed. I guess that's what makes relationships so real. Life is defined by our experiences, and while no one enjoys a bad experience, they happen to all of us. In this book, Vienne shares how she was able to overcome these struggles and change her life story into one of joy and encouragement. I'm proud of Vienne's determination and accomplishments, and she is an inspiration, even to me. I, Vienne's husband, endorse this book.
As everyone does, Vaughn and I have a story. Ours isn't finished yet. It's still ongoing, and we are still growing. But the journey from where we started to where we are now can definitely be summed up in one word: grace. This reminder of grace I've received from Vaughn never loses its emotional effect on my heart. It gets me every time. Even as I've added his words to this chapter and reread it, I had to stop and wipe tears from my eyes. Those were tears not from still carrying shame or guilt, but because I am simply overwhelmed by his unconditional love. But also, I realize that there are many out there just like me. Did I deserve such love and forgiveness after the pain I had caused him? No, none of us do. That's exactly my point. What is different now? The answer is directly related to what I have chosen to do about forgiveness. If I had chosen to disobey and let unforgiveness sit in my heart, or if I had refused to accept Vaughn's forgiveness, I couldn't move forward. But I did make that choice, and I am living a transformed life of freedom with the mindset that it doesn't matter what your circumstances are or how hard things get. You can always be free. I am free to have joy in the midst of my pain. I am free to love when the world tells me it's okay to hate. I am free to have peace when my world gets turned upside down and everything points to chaos. The story of my newfound freedom and confidence was not an easy road. It was not void of pain or suffering, but rather it was a path of self-sacrifice, tough choices, and perseverance. Freedom and contagious courage are possible, and you can do it, but you can't do it in your own strength. That understanding is foundational in moving forward. Withholding or refusing forgiveness results in pain, the kind that can become a toxin to our soul that will stunt our health and vitality. Forgiveness, I understand, might be another trigger for many and actually might be unbearable. Trust me, Vaughn and I both understand that. A real life CTRL-Z takes time. When Vaughn and I started over, even with God's help and Vaughn's support, I battled my demons for a long time before I could say I was free. Please also understand that forgiveness doesn't always mean I return to the same type of relationship. Forgiveness is giving up the hope of a better past. That was something else that held me back for a long time, and it made it difficult to let go of unforgiveness. However, for Vaughn and me, I wasn't just returning to the same relationship. I was entering something even better. A better past? No, a better future. Yes. In each step, I have learned that no matter where I am in my journey, it all comes down to those same three things which I have emphasized before. Unreserved obedience, walking when you can't see, and discipline. Ouch, the D word. But if you're ready, sit here in this atmosphere and allow yourself some time to feel God's love meeting you where you are. Imagine God sitting next to you and being with you in your pain. Let His love displace the pain of the circumstances and inaccurate conclusions that are taking up some space in your heart and in your mind. You can answer this question now or come back later, but ask yourself, is there any area in your life where you need a CTRL-Z? On a scale of 1 to 10, how free is your heart? A 10 means I'm totally free. A 0 means there ain't no way in. I'm forgiven X. 1 could mean I don't even want to entertain the idea of forgiving. However, I am willing to consider that one day, if there's a mountain moving miracle, I might consider the idea. I might be an ordained minister, but I promise you, I will not judge you if your notes get a little colorful with the expression of your hurt or frustration regarding some of the very painful life struggles. Trust me, God is not offended with our very real emotion to our very real problems. As you take this journey with me, I pray that you ask God to help you face your fears and find the courage to forgive. If you are not ready to go there yet, it's okay. Just please bookmark this section and come back when you're ready. And if there are any areas for which you need a do-over, remember that Control-Z takes time. The investment of faith, obedience, and discipline may seem challenging, but you'll discover the beauty of the Control-Z in your life.